The story begins with an enthusiastic police officer. This video was recorded before he investigates a serious case. Consecutive crimes happen. He discovered the features and methods of the murderers. He would act when it rained. Gun-wook waited and accidentally saw a woman passing by. A guy wearing a black raincoat followed her. When chasing, the murderer noticed his presence. The single fatal stab left the police officer unable to survive. The murderer managed to escape. The death of Gun-wook came as a tremendous shock to the family. His father, also a police officer, was painful of his son's loss. He determined to seek help from Police Captain Gu-tak, who agreed to assist. Gu-tak had a daughter who was murdered a few years ago, just before the day she went study abroad. After that, Gu-tak became devastated and eventually faced suspension from duty. Gu-tak is known by the nickname Mad Dog because he would use any means to capture the perpetrator. Coming across a group of thugs on the street, Gu-tak would teach them a lesson. So, to solve this difficult case, Gu-tak decided to create a team, recruiting some criminals. First is Uncle Park Woong-cheol, the #1 idol in my life. He used to be a gang boss. He is serving a 28-year prison sentence for multiple charges of violent assault. The uncle would beat anyone bothering him, even the prison warden had to be careful. The second is Tae-soo, an assassin and an expert of using knives. His information is limited. His motives and methods for committing crimes remain unclear. He was caught after one last incident. He killed a man and then surrendered himself. The third is Young-moon, a psychotic genius. At 12 years old, his IQ was 165. He was the youngest person with a doctorate degree in mathematics in the country, and the youngest serial killer. The highest psychiatric level is 40, but this guy reached 38. He killed 15 people, but the police couldn't find any fingerprints. The reason is that he used white kerosene to erase his fingerprints, gathering the 3 people mentioned above. They are transported in a special vehicle, each one separate in a car. Arrived, Tae-soo and Woong-cheol met first. The first impression was not very good. Woong-cheol asked, but Tae-soo had an attitude. They almost got into a fight. But a police officer who will oversee the special team stops them. This was their first time meet and there was no Gu-tak present, so the two started fighting again. When Gu-tak came, he talked about the reason why they were here. Capturing the criminal reduces the sentence by 5 years. Only self-capturers qualify for sentence reduction, others miss out. After Gu-tak said this, the atmosphere continued to be tense until a phone call rang, announced that Young-moon had escaped. Letting 2 policemen keep an eye on such an intelligent as him is too subjective. He easily controlled the 2 policemen and escaped. Now where he goes is another tricky question. Gu-tak now took out a photo, said that the girl in the picture was the person that Young-moon loved. And for some reason, she was almost killed by him. This girl would be the first person he was looking for when he was free. Gu-tak immediately told Woong-cheol and Tae-soo to look for clues about that girl. Who captures this guy will be reduced 4 years in sentence. The 2 put electronic cuffs on them. These cuffs will help Gu-tak to control where they are. They went to the karaoke bar where Young-moon's girlfriend used to work. They just went in and hit the guards up. Even if the guy was bigger than Woong-cheol, he would punch him lying on the floor. After threatening, he finally got the address. Young-moon's girlfriend, unable to repay a heavy debt, was sold to these people. The gang members did not give any information. Tae-soo decides to handle them without relying on weapons. The 3 guys fell to the ground and then he used hammers to hit the henchmen, forcing the big brother to cooperate. The big brother was no longer stubborn. After knowing the address of Young-moon's girlfriend, they quickly went there. But Young-moon was so smart that he was 1 step ahead of them, coming to the girl's place, making her extremely scared. Now we know why Young-moon is called a psychopath. The reason is he doesn't remember the crimes he committed. Even when he intended to kill the girl he loved, he couldn't remember. On the contrary, the girlfriend always accused Young-moon. Convicted of the disremember crime caused Young-moon to lose control and try to kill her again. As a result, Gu-tak's team arrived and kicked the door in. Gu-tak calmly challenged Young-moon, saying that he should join his team if he didn't want to be shot. Young-moon did not listen and got shot in the arm. He then immediately jumped down, stole the car, and ran away. Tae-soo chased after him and crashed the car, causing him to hit his head on the steering wheel. Woong-cheol took the opportunity to run over there and punched Young-moon to faint. Until they brought him back and told him everything. They need him to catch a serial killer. If he did, he would be reduced to a 5-year sentence. This guy obeyed. The 5 members celebrated to form the team. They begin their mission tomorrow. Gu-tak also praised that Woong-cheol was lucky. Tae-soo almost caught Young-moon but missed. So Woong-cheol officially was reduced 4 years in sentence. As for Mi-young, she had not completely placed her trust in these 3 people. The next day, another murder case occurs, and the perpetrator is also the serial killer they have been hunting. Gu-tak sent his team to investigate the scene, but Tae-soo remembered something. He wanted to get out of the car to visit someone. This woman helped Tae-soo when he was seriously injured in the past. From then on, he secretly fell in love with this woman. When he went to visit this woman, she had moved away. Without thinking, he drove to look for her. He found his master who Tae-soo asked to protect her before he went to prison. When he asked the master where she was, he said he didn't know. He not only couldn't find the woman, but also was slapped by Gu-tak. After that, he returned to work, investigating clues about the serial killer in the rain. 3 people would have half a day to find clues. Tae-soo and Young-moon investigate the crime scene. Tae-soo discovered that this murderer was quite short in height. Young-moon discovered something but hid it. Woong Cheol investigates independently, heading to the bail money collection center. He entered and knocked down on each person. He met the leader wearing a floral shirt. That is the big brother of this center. The big brother was slapped down by the uncle. The reason the uncle came was to find some henchmen to help him solve the case. They regroup, each holding onto their clues without exchanging, fearing others to know their clues. If other caught first, their effort would be nothing. But a moment later, Young-moon provided his clue. With a high IQ, Young-moon deduced that the murderer liked the smell of blood. The reason he only killed people in the rain is because the scent of blood becomes intense. They continued to delve into other case files and discovered this murderer often leaves needle marks on his victim's arms. Rather, it was a syringe needle. He took the victim's blood as a reward. He sneaked into the house and murdered the homeowner while they slept at night. But 2 people survived after being attacked by this guy. Gu-tak and Tae-soo arrived at the first survivor's house. Coincidentally, this first victim was the person Tae-soo secretly loved. He tried to find her but saw her in this situation. I will call her Ms. So-young. So-young said that on a rainy night, while So-young and her daughter were sleeping, someone broke into the house, intending to murder them. The daughter woke up and went to call the neighbors for help. The murderer was detected, so he ran away. Young-moon and Mi-young came to meet the second survivor. The murderer also broke into her house on a rainy night. Then, he whispered into her ear, "To defeat that guy, I have to kill some innocent people. Please understand me." After saying those words, he also struck her. She survived with a face scar. The team regrouped and discussed the situation. So the killer wants to defeat whom? Are there others with the same bloodthirsty passion? Indeed, before this rainy murderer, there was also another serial killer. This was the first rainy serial killer. He was arrested after killing 23 people, also with a passion for blood. The second serial killer pursuing was the number of 23 deaths. He aimed to surpass the first serial killer and become the number 1 killer. And review the case files up to the present. The second rainy murderer killed 21 people. Only 2 more people remain for him to equalize the score. Meanwhile, Uncle Woong Cheol, with his unique method of solving crimes, deduced that if this killer regularly broke into other people's houses, he must have the skills to open locks. In a tool shop, he saw an old man with excellent unlocking skill. He immediately dragged him out to arrest. Then Gu-tak stopped him. That night it rained again, and the murderer would surely strike again. Woong Cheol sent his henchmen to monitor the area for any suspicious individuals. Woong Cheol encountered a suspicious person, a person carrying a bloody bag. He quickly called on radio to report and chased after. But the murderer suddenly attacked. The murderer couldn't stab him, then was punched. But this guy was stubborn. He hit Woong Cheol's head with a wrench, causing him bleeding. The murderer was able to escape. He returned in time to kill another person, add another tube of blood to his container. The next morning, the body of a woman killed last night was found. Although the murderer was chased last night, he was too quick. He killed the scar-faced woman whom he missed. Now his next target may be So-young. The police force protecting her was increased. But Gu-tak came to a reckless decision, telling the police to leave aim to lure the murderer. The next night it rained again, and the murderer would surely act. On the way home, So-young was approached by a guy. It was the locksmith whom Woong Cheol intended to arrest. He revealed to be a murderer when he chased after So-young. After beating her, he was killing her with a knife, but Tae-soo arrived just in time. Luckily, he stopped the old locksmith. He beat him until he begged for it. He tried to kill him, but Gu-tak stopped and shot him in the arm. The murderer was caught and his sentence was reduced by 5 years. But Tae-soo was extremely angry. He intended to beat Gu-tak because he pushed the person he loved into danger. But right then something unexpected happened. The rainy murderer said, until now he had only killed 22 people, 22 bloody tube. The photo of the 23rd victim was not killed by him. The whole room was surprised. The police arrived. Because the murderer was arrested, the 3 of them had to go back to prison. The case of that victim was abandoned. A few days later, when the 3 returned to prison, another woman's body was discovered of brutally dismemberment. The head officer had to let Gu-tak gather the squad, although the 3 were extremely uncomfortable at first. Are we just toys, bring out when in need and throw back into prison when the mission is done? But then all 3 of them came again. Now the 3 of them will have a title. They are called a Special Investigation Unit to help the police solve difficult cases. The team take action, we will call them the bad guys. The activities of the bad guys will be kept secret, and their mission is to catch criminals. Captured criminals may receive reduced sentences before returning to prison. In challenging cases, successful captures lead to reduced sentences. Just like that, until their prison sentence is over, they will be completely freed. Back to this difficult case. A young girl was abducted while she was back home from work. A girl had the same age as Gutak's deceased daughter. A guy in a floral shirt acted very quickly. He had done this before. The guy in the floral shirt had taken her back and locked her in a dark room. When the girl asked for calling the police, he dragged her into the bathroom and finished her. But when Gutak arrived, there were many surprises. The body they found was not that girl. That young girl may not be dead yet, maybe he took her somewhere else. The body they found, they didn't identify whose that is. Because this floral shirt guy was professional. He did it not just for amusement. He kidnapped victims to take their organs and sell them to hospitals. He kept all the organs in the refrigerator. This guy was so cruel, because this guy committed the crime in the rented house. So the whole team knew his identity, a man named Gwang, 37 years old. After knowing his profile, they began to investigate and had to quickly rescue the young girl. Young Moon and Mi-young followed the camera footage. Found out a man wearing a cap was an accomplice of Gwang. He guarded for Gwang taking action, and they followed his movements. They also discovered officials have taken bribes from organ traffickers. Gutak interrogated a prosecutor for information. Meanwhile, Tae-soo looked for intermediaries. They trafficked organs from retailers and treated women as a commodity. Tae-soo got the information and then warned this guy. Woong Cheol managed to infiltrate a network of fake medical consultants. Actually, they traded organs from willing donors at prices of 50 million a kidney and 100 million a liver. They had clearly set prices for items, which attracted many people to willingly donate their organs. Woong Cheol sent his brother Mr. Ju to pretend to sell his organs and successfully broke into the dangerous territory. After 10 p.m., the police didn't dare to roam around here, but Woong Cheol was not the police. He continued observing while Ju was almost slaughtered. Criminals saw someone disrupting business, no matter who it was, they rushed forward and attacked. Unfortunately for them, Woong Cheol wasn't a typical, many people have died of his punching. Despite being punched, these guys held baseball bats and struck relentlessly. Gutak came with a gas canister to threaten. This time, the criminals were afraid of death and immediately revealed Gwang's location. They all followed their own clues to the same location. That's place where Gwang was arresting the young girl. They injected her with anesthetics and prepared their equipment. Gutak and his team arrived, they rushed in and beat each of them one by one. Tae-soo and Woong Cheol fought on each side, these organ traffickers fell after 2 punches. The floral shirt man named Gwang was beaten severely. Gutak almost lost control of himself. This young girl was the same age as his deceased daughter. That's why he wanted to kill these cold-blooded criminals, but then the girl woke up. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, the mission was successful. The person who captured Gwang was Woong Cheol, so he would be reduced 5-year sentence. After a total reduction of 9 years, there are 19 years left from the initial 28-year sentence. The police arrived at the scene, and the criminals were taken away, but the bad guys' team were not sent to jail yet. This guy Gwang was just a member of a large-scale organ trade, they still had a lot of work to do. Woong Cheol went to resolve his issue. Suddenly a black car came and took him away. The head officer asked for the help of a policeman named Gutak, a man willing to do anything to catch the criminals. Gutak recruited 3 prisoners, the first one was Park Woong Cheol. The second was Tae-soo, a hired assassin, the third was a psychopathic genius, Young Moon. If any of the 3 caught the criminal, their prison time would be reduced by 5 years. With the combination of 3 outstanding criminals, they solved the case of the Rainy Killer and the organ trafficker, but it didn't stop there. Especially after Woong Cheol was kidnapped by a group of strangers. The kidnapper is his big brother, the big brother of the Dukwang gang. This person was very powerful and was also who Woong Cheol greatly respected. Big brother ordered him to kill someone, who was his genius brother, Young Moon. Dukwang eliminates him as a favor to one seeking revenge for his daughter who was a victim of Young Moon. The time for eliminating was 2 weeks. When Woong Cheol returned, he lied that he was lost. Others were initially suspicious but ignored it later. The new mission was to destroy an illegal organ trafficking network. Looking at the map was enough to confuse. But just pay attention to these 3 guys, the intermediaries between sellers and buyers. They had met these guys before, so it was easy to catch them again. An illegal organization with a large number of members and such a large scale. Why haven't they been caught before? There are 2 reasons. The police tried to find evidence to incriminate these guys but could not find it. Meanwhile, the other members asked the junior for more information. He was stubborn and refused to talk, so Tae-soo had to take action. The police only conduct verbal questioning. But Tae-soo was not a police officer, so he asked more politely. He used the pen on the table to stab his hand, making the junior's face turn red. He seemed like laughing, but he was in pain. When Tae-soo intended to stab him again, he obediently confessed. As a dangerous mission, whoever caught that woman would be reduced 10-year sentence. Because of that, only 5 members of the bad guys knew it. Along with a police driver, who were aware of the mission, they arrived at the place of Ms. Soon. Pretend to be a police officer who accepted bribes. They went inside to take evidence of illegal activities. 4 people went inside, Mi Young and the police driver stayed outside to guard. Passing the security guards downstairs, the 4 split up to take photos of evidence. Gu Tak went to Ms. Soon's location, while the other 3 went to the place where they took organs from victims. Young Moon noticed something suspicious as the security guards kept leading them in circles. They were discovered, so the team quickly knocked them down and found another way. Tae-soo was alone, but he called and reported the situation to Mi Young in time. The policeman driver knocked Mi Young unconscious. The reason Ms. Soon and the juniors knew their plan was because the policeman driver reported everything to her. This police officer was the real accepting bribes. Later, the captain also arrived. You think he came to help, but he didn't. This captain was also bribed by Ms. Soon. He came to eliminate the 4 of them. Because guns would leave evidence, they used knives. Inside, Woong Cheol was unexpectedly ambushed. The henchman struck him relentlessly. Young Moon rushed to the rescue but was stabbed. Woong Cheol quickly defeated the henchman and ran away with Young Moon. They ran into a room where the victims were stored. The criminal was too cruel. Woong Cheol eased Young Moon down in the corner. When he was going out to check the situation, the captain came in. They followed the trail of Young Moon's blood and came to him. Woong Cheol saw them outside and thought about the mission he received. He had to kill Young Moon in whatever way. Thinking about it, his conscience didn't allow it. Woong Cheol swiftly returned, punching the police officers to rescue Young Moon. The captain saw his forces were overwhelmed. He was furious and intended to use a gun. Tae-soo arrived, disarmed him, and knocked him down. The 2 combined and quickly handled these police officers. Gu Tak came and made a plan together. Their only chance to escape was to take Ms. Soon as a hostage. Tae-soo went to activate the elevator, and the other 3 went up to catch her. Meanwhile, Mi Young, after being knocked out, woke up a while later. She used a rock to knock out the driver, then called the head officer for help. Gu Tak successfully caught Ms. Soon and went down to threaten the henchmen, but they were too stubborn and not afraid. She also showed no signs of fear, stating that if she were to die, the person who killed Gu Tak and his members would take her position. The hostage plan was a failure. They had no choice but fought. With so many people, Tae-soo and Woong Cheol were the 2 people who could last the longest. Young Moon just punched a few guys and then was beaten. Fighting too many people made Gu Tak quickly collapse. The overwhelming number was undefeatable. They couldn't save teammates if they couldn't save themselves first. When Gu Tak and Young Moon exhausted, Tae-soo and Woong Cheol were going to be worn out. The head officer also led the police to block and arrest all the henchmen. They were saved at the last minute. Woong Cheol punched one last guy to relieve. After destroying the organ trafficking network, who will receive a 10-year reduction in sentence. Because all 3 could not capture Ms. Soon themselves, they played rock, paper, scissors to decide, and Woong Cheol was the lucky winner. The uncle only had 9 more years in prison. 2 weeks passed by. Tae-soo visited So Young in the hospital. After she was the target of the rainy killer, she gradually calmed down. The life of So Young and her daughter were extremely difficult. So Young's husband was murdered, and the person who murdered her husband was Tae-soo. So Young did not know that, she just knew her husband was murdered. Tae-soo felt so guilty, so he turned himself in and was arrested. The team returned after completing the mission of destroying a drug trafficking ring. When the 3 were returning to the prison, they encountered a random shooting incident on the way. 6 people were killed by 6 shots fired in daylight. The only clue available is the appearance of the perpetrator with a black hat and a black mask. His shooting skill was extremely excellent, never missing a shot. The gun used is a double-barreled shotgun. Tae-soo, with the ability to reimagine the case, came and recreated the scene. Young Moon and Gu Tak re-examined the identities of victims. A few days ago, there was a similar shooting incident. Also, 6 victims were killed by 6 shots. The weapon used was also a double-barreled shotgun. So this murderer committed 2 shootings in just a few days. Did he do that for fun? Investigating the identity of the victim, but the 6th victim of both cases worked at the same company. An electronics company named Sam Jean. The first case was a team leader, the second case was an HR manager. The other people at the scene were not related. Meanwhile, Mi Young and Woong Cheol found clues about the murderer. In both shooting incidents also had a taxi arrived. He disguised himself as a taxi driver to avoid suspicion. Mi Young arranged a situation and waited for the murderer to come out. She looked at the screen and saw the murderer's taxi. Woong Cheol and his junior Ju followed the car, ready to apprehend him. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The guy wearing a mask and black hat used a gun to shoot innocent people nearby. Most of them were injured. Woong Cheol rushed there. He heard the murderer was talking to a man who wore a suit, then shot him. Woong Cheol chased him but couldn't catch up. Then Du Kwang appeared and took him away. Gu Tak and Mi Young arrived at the scene. 4 people were injured and 1 person died. The deceased also worked at Sam Jean Company. Tae-soo, after hearing the news, he went to meet a younger brother who was also a killer. He, as Tae-soo, was raised by the master from a young age. He was a killer, with excellent shooting skills, and currently managing a shooting range. Tae-soo discovered that there was not only one shooter, they used stolen guns. There were 2 guys, one was an excellent shooter, and the other didn't know how to shoot. After having the address, Tae-soo received a phone call from Woong Cheol. The uncle was captured by Do Kwang, but he still gave clues about what he had heard from the shooter. "Why are you doing this to us?" After that, the uncle had to turn off the phone. Tae-soo went out and met a group of people. They showed Young Moon's picture and said they want to eliminate him. Tae-soo asked why, but he didn't receive any answers, so they started a fight. Tae-soo hit all the strangers and then was arrested by the police. Until tomorrow he would be released. Tae-soo gave all his clues to Gu Tak to continue to find the murderer. Now there's only Young Moon. The two followed the clues to find the house of one of the 2 murderers. This guy was the one who didn't know how to use a gun. He confessed that both he and Mi-young used to work as electricians at Sam Jean Company. Mi-young's situation was extremely difficult. Due to his wife's death and financial difficulties, he had to send his child to someone else to raise. Mi-young decided to seek revenge out of immense anger, leading to the shooting incidents. The 2 arranged the shootings to appear as random incidents. They aimed 1 person for revenge but shot 6 people to divert the police investigation. The next target of Mi-young was the president of Sam Jean Company. They used the president as a decoy, arranging forces to surround the area, just waiting for Mi-young to fall into the trap. Without a doubt, Mi-young brought a gun. When he was about to shoot, Young Moon stopped him. Though he just revenged on the wicked, killing innocent people was wrong. Young Moon tried his best to stop Mi-young, hoping he wouldn't make any more mistakes. Innocents were dragged into his revenge by Mi-young. They were also in pitiful circumstances like Mi-young. The sincere words coming out from Young Moon had awakened Mi-young, realizing that he was driven to a desperate path by anger. Gu Tak saw the good in the psychopathic murderer. The police quickly came to take Mi-young away. The president of Sam Jin's company was also arrested for embezzlement charges. After finishing the case, Gu Tak went to meet O prosecutor. He said he wanted to join the bad guys, but Gu Tak didn't agree. But the prosecutor said he knew the reason why Gu Tak chose these 3 criminals instead of the other guys. He knew the relationship between Gu Tak and them. Woong Cheol was forced into a dead end by Du Kwang, saying that he had to die because he couldn't kill Young Moon. Du Kwang did that to Woong Cheol, but the uncle used to be the right-hand man of the Du Kwang. The ring on the big brother's hand was the present of the uncle. Du Kwang used to save Woong Cheol. He was granted a life of wealth and became the leader of the gang. Despite living such a life, Woong Cheol has never found peace within himself. He wanted to live a normal life. He didn't want to kill anymore. However, Du Kwang decided to bury him alive. After many days, Woong Cheol disappeared. Gu Tak and the team followed the location of the electronic watch. They went to the place where Woong Cheol was taken to. On the way, the uncle beat all the henchmen in the car and wanted to escape, but when Du Kwang arrived, he stopped. They took Woong Cheol to the grave. Du Kwang took off the ring and returned it. They erased their brotherhood. He ordered his henchmen to bury him. When Gu Tak and the team arrived, the grave was filled. But Woong Cheol crawled up on the ground. At that time, Du Kwang got in the car and left. A phone call came in, revealing that Du Kwang didn't have the heart to harm Woong Cheol. They used that method to cut off their relationship. Du Kwang was suddenly stopped by a group of people and kidnapped on the way back. Woong Cheol on the other end of the line heard everything. Du Kwang was being betrayed by his juniors. The uncle asked Gu Tak's team for help. Beside Woong Cheol as his right-hand man, there were 10 more people below him. Each of them had to pay a high amount of fees. To know which guy intended to betray, Gu Tak and Woong Cheol made a plan. The uncle organized a meeting to gather all his juniors. Woong Cheol would attend the meeting to see who was suspicious. They all seemed not happy when met the uncle. Then, he with support from Gu Tak, quickly discovered who planned the kidnapping. They used covert listening device to locate where they hide Du Kwang. Woong Cheol with Tae-soo and Young Moon arrived at the suspicious place. They arrived but didn't see anyone. They met a junior who was planning to rebel. The 2 sides fought fiercely. These henchmen who intend to rebel was too useless. They hold a stick to hit Uncle Woong Cheol but was struck back. Tae-soo defeated these guys with his skills without a knife. The gang members fell one by one later. Young Moon repeatedly hit this guys until his phone fell off. Woong Cheol picked up the phone and called the traitor. Even if you eliminate Du Kwang, you won't be able to take over all of Seoul. Release Du Kwang. The traitor was not afraid, and angrily smashed the phone. He still decided to eliminate Du Kwang. Du Kwang was locked in the car trunk and remembered his phone in the pocket. He immediately called Gu Tak for help. Thanks to that, they were able to locate Du Kwang. They told him to trim the tail lights to make it fall off, so they could determine which car it was. After chasing for a while, they were blocked by cars on the road. Young Moon jumped out and drove a motorbike to chase after them. He used a baseball bat to break the windows, causing the henchman to hit the tree. Young Moon came to rescue Du Kwang, but to his surprise, the big brother intended to finish off him. Du Kwang took a knife and approached him, stabbing him once, but Young Moon was only injured in an arm. Wong Cheol saw that and immediately ran to stop him, holding the knife without hesitance. How can such a big brother kill the person just saving him? Then Du Kwang lowered the knife. By the end of episode 6, the three of them returned to the prison. Young Moon wondered who wanted to kill him. Tae-soo saw his master's body being brought back. He was killed by someone. Tae-soo, a hired hitman, was taken out the prison with Wong Cheol and Young Moon. They were summoned again to investigate a difficult case. The dead person was Tae-soo's master. He was killed with a knife to the artery with a single knife strike, and no traces were left behind. It seems that this one was a skilled knife user and was also a professional killer. A few days later, Tae-soo received another bad news. His killer brother had taken his own life. He discovered that the fingerprints of his killer brother was on the murder weapon. But that brother could not be the murderer. Because he and Tae-soo both respected their master, and this brother was only good at using guns, not knives. The murderer must be a knife master. Tae-soo did not believe that his brother would suicide like that. Tae-soo continued to investigate and met an intermediary. This old man was assigning tasks to the hitmen. When someone wanted to eliminate a target, they would contact the intermediary, so he could contact and assign the mission to the killer. Tae-soo asked him where Young-suk was, and he said he didn't know. But he introduced another intermediary to Tae-soo, who might know where Young-suk was. Coincidentally, this young intermediary had met Tae-soo before and told Tae-soo to kill Young Moon, but he refused. Tae-soo went to find him and snuck inside to sit there. Tae-soo asked him why he wanted to kill Young Moon and received the answer that a person whose child was killed by Young Moon, so he hired him to take revenge on Moon. This intermediary helped the customer to find the good assassin, that was Tae-soo, but he refused, so he found Young-suk. It could be said, like Tae-soo, he had excellent knife skills to kill Young Moon. But what does this have to do with the finishing off the master and the brother? The reason was in the terms set by the other customer. If Tae-soo disagreed with the request to eliminate Young Moon, Tae-soo would have to die after Young-suk was hired. He agreed to this term. His brother and master knew about it and tried to warn him, but in the end, they were eliminated by Young-suk. Gu-tak and Mi-young investigated the house of Tae-soo's brother. They found out that the cause of death was murder, not suicide. Meanwhile, Wong Cheol and Young Moon were attacked by a group of people. The uncle used his powerful punches to knock each of them down to the floor. They suspected this group was sent by his big brother. Thinking about that, the two went to find Du Kwang. Young Moon would stay downstairs. Wong Cheol would go to meet his big brother. A junior was punched for blocking his way. Inside, Wong Cheol asked who was behind order to kill Young Moon and was that person dangerous. As Du Kwang said, those people were not sent by Du Kwang. He had already given up killing Young Moon. At this time downstairs, Young Moon was passed and stabbed by a stranger with a fatal wound when he was standing alone. Young Moon only recognized it when he saw blood flowing down. He started to feel dizzy, but fortunately, Wong Cheol came and quickly took Young Moon to the hospital and luckily survived. Tae-soo rushed over and met Gu-tak here. Young Moon was stabbed with just one stab, but the stab was very accurate, aiming at the most important part of the body. This killer has the same skills as Tae-soo. Learning what just happened, Tae-soo went back to meet the intermediary to ask about Young-suk. Had the one behind, but when he turned back, he saw the intermediary had suicide. Tae-soo used his phone and tracked it down, then he found Young-suk. Young-suk become cruel now, killing the master and younger brother, but he felt not guilty. He also said that as per customer's request, Young Moon would have to die at all. He sent a junior to put poison in the water transfer bag, but luckily, he was caught by Wong Cheol. Punching a junior assassin, the assassin also punches, but it seems light. These punches seem to have no effect on the uncle. But by the time Wong Cheol punched him back, the guy was lying on the floor and unconscious. He was punched until he completely fainted. Meanwhile, Tae-soo and Young-suk got into a fierce fight. That was an inconclusive battle between people who learned from the same teacher. Because they learned the same skills, it was like they were fighting in front of a mirror. They even had the same knife skill. Since not carrying a weapon, Tae-soo was slashed in the shoulder, but then he regained the advantage. He used a piece of wood to restrain Young-suk's hand, then picked up a rock to lash the vulnerable points. Young-suk became exhausted and was stabbed once. Tae-soo hugged the person whom he treated as his brother. Tae-soo did not want to do this at all because Young-suk was his last close person. It was so painful when he killed someone who seemed like family. Finally, the fight ended when Young-suk fell. Tae-soo, after the death of his brother, he swore never to kill again. Then Tae-soo walked to Soo-jong's house. He intended to admit killing her husband, but Tae-soo stopped. He told Soo-jong that, "Now I understand the feeling of losing close people." She misunderstood that maybe it was because of the failed assassination on Young-moon. The person who wanted to kill him was always one person. The person who could order Do Kwon to kill him and even hire assassins was not trivial. Young-moon couldn't remember the crimes he committed previously. So he hired a detective to follow him and taking pictures of where Young-moon went and did he killed those victims. Young-moon, after waking up in the hospital, he went to find that detective. According to that detective, he saw Young-moon following the victims before they died, the day after the police discovered the murder. He also went to the scene where he committed the crime. Though the detective didn't witness it himself, wherever Young-moon went, the murder happened. If he wasn't a killer, then who was it? Even once, while following Young-moon, the detective had a hair-raising shock. Young-moon slowly turned around and said to the detective who was secretly following in the distance, "I killed all of them." Then he gave a haunting smile. At this time, Gu-tak overheard everything. His face was not surprised but instead was angry. "Do you remember Gu-tak had a daughter who was murdered? One of the victims killed by Young-moon also was Gu-tak's daughter." He knew it before, but hearing those things made him even more painful. When Young-moon went out, Gu-tak followed him. He intended to use a gun out of his anger, but Young-moon was taken back to the hospital by Mi-young. Gu-tak also quickly followed to find an opportunity. Meanwhile, Mi-young sat in O prosecutor's car. She learned his purpose. To join the bad guys was because he wanted the bad guys to disband. Looking back at Young-moon's first case before he became a serial killer, Young-moon returned home and saw his parents were murdered by two thieves. He was angry and killed them. 3 years ago, O prosecutor undertook Young-moon's case. Young-moon, with the help of the prosecutor, was released in self-defense excuse. After Young-moon was released, a series of crimes immediately occurred. Young-moon was convicted of those crimes. Oh felt guilty, so he quit the job. But after hearing about the bad guys, their sentence would be reduced 5 years after each mission. He decided not to let Young-moon have a chance to go out again. So he decided to disband the bad guys at all cost. Meanwhile, Gu-tak returned to Young-moon's room, wanted to kill him out of anger. But Young-moon said he was not the killer. If Gu-tak wanted to release anger, he could shoot him. If he wanted to find out the truth, then help him. As a result, Gu-tak also changed his mind. But if the investigation showed Young-moon was the killer, Gu-tak would do what he has decided. Gu-tak took Young-moon's electronic handcuffs off, then they set off. They found the house of the doctor who was treating Young-moon. The special thing was the doctor's strange treatment method. He gave Young-moon a pill each time. Currently, he has quit his job. On the other side, Mi-young received news that the Rainy killer in prison had died. The investigation concluded that it was a suicide, but Mi-young knew it wasn't. She met the head officer. Before the case was reported, the head officer visited him. When she asked him, she only received vague answers. The head officer said that he was very lenient and talked to the killer that if he truly repented for killing his son, then the head officer was willing to forgive him, hoping to have some peace and receive an apology from the killer. But the killer played around without any remorse. He said he would take good care of himself. Being released, he would come find the head officer. And as the result, the head officer ordered to finish off the Rainy killer. Mi-young realized what the head officer had done, remembered the bad guys also originated from the head officer. She could no longer trust him. Mi-young decided to work with O prosecutor to disband the bad guys. According to O prosecutor, the key to dissolve the bad guys was to find out who was behind the order to eliminate Young-moon. As long as they found that one, the bad guys would be disbanded. On the other side, Gu-tak and Young-moon found the doctor who had treated Young-moon. The doctor saw Young-moon coming, so he ran away. He was caught by Gu-tak, but something unexpected happened. Young-moon saw Gu-tak eavesdropping, so he pointed a gun at him. Feeling like he couldn't trust Gu-tak anymore, he electrocuted him to motionless, then dragged the doctor away. After the doctor was thrown into the car, he promptly injected an anesthetic into Young-moon's leg. When Young-moon lost consciousness, he was driven away. On the other side, Gu-tak couldn't call Young-moon, so he left. Angrily broke things. Mi-young entered. Mi-young asked if Gu-tak was behind everything, the one who gave orders to kill Young-moon. Gu-tak said with a shady smile, "That's right, now let's find out the truth." Going back 2 years ago, which was the turning point of everything. Murder cases continued to occur with similar methods of committing crimes. They couldn't find the killer because he used white kerosene to wash his fingerprints off the victims' bodies. The investigation became more difficult. Gu-tak took on this case. Gu-tak's daughter was still alive at that time and had a bright future. Passionate about learning the piano, she was so good that her tutor even admired her, saying that Gu-tak should arrange for his child to study abroad. It would be a waste of her talent when stay in Korea. But as a poor police officer, the cost of studying abroad was so high that Gu-tak couldn't afford it. Coincidentally at that time, Du Kwang was invading for their territory in Seoul with Woong Cheol. With his powerful assistant, Seoul would soon be in their hands. In order to rack up Seoul without the attention of the police, Du Kwang planned to bribe Gu Tak with a sum of 50 million won, make him ignore the expansion of Du Kwang gang. He was an upright police officer who hated bribers the most. Gu Tak attacked Du Kwang without any hesitation. When he returned, his daughter because seeing him making money so hard. She found a part-time job and was cheated, and beaten to the hospital. Gu Tak was mad, and fined the guy who beat his daughter and repeatedly punched him. Why do poor people have to endure such circumstances? Thinking about his daughter, with 50 million won Gu Tak can send her to study abroad. Finally, he agreed to accept the bribe, but Gu Tak had one request. During the progress, crimes like violent attacks. If Du Kwang was prosecuted, he will be sent to prison. Gu Tak facilitated to tell Du Kwang to hand over Woong Cheol to him. He could blame it on Woong Cheol. Du Kwang initially objected but eventually agreed to Gu Tak. So Woong Cheol had to go to prison for 28 years and took the accuses. Gu Tak then continued to investigate into difficult murder case. He and the police had to watch and reinvestigate all surveillance cameras installed at gas stations. And they found a young man who often came to buy white kerosene, that was Young Moon. They suspected Young Moon used white kerosene to remove fingerprints from the victim's body. They rushed in and arrested Young Moon to the disbelief of him and his girlfriend. Gu Tak proceeded to interrogate Young Moon. Why did he buy so much white kerosene? Young Moon answered that he bought it for his girlfriend. His girlfriend was an oil painter. She used kerosene to wash her brushes. Gu Tak didn't believe, so he brought out the photos of the victims, asking if he killed these people. Young Moon said he was not the killer, but the camera recorded it. Young Moon went to the victim's house. Then the next day the police discovered someone dead. Young Moon said he did not remember going to those places. Gu Tak became angry and immediately rushed to attack Young Moon, forcing him to confess, but Young Moon's final answer was still don't remember. Gu Tak thought that geniuses like this must be very mischievous. Immediately used a lie detector, based on a chart to detect. They showed pictures of the victims and asked if Young Moon had killed anyone. Showing each photo one by one, he still answered nope. The lie detector test reported that Young Moon has been sincerely truthful. After a period of detention, Young Moon could not be convicted of killing. Young Moon was released. He went out and saw Gu Tak was talking with his daughter. He said something that made Gu Tak suspicious. His daughter was truly beautiful. Then Young Moon smiled and went home. After receiving bribe money from Du Kwang, Gu Tak was able to send his daughter to study abroad. She would take off the next morning. Gu Tak decided to have a farewell party with his daughter. Gu Tak received a call from a prosecutor, so he had to leave. When his daughter came home from school and prepared her favorite food, there was a knock on the door. When she opened the door, a stranger used a knife to finish off her. Gu Tak returned in the rain and cried. He saw his daughter lying motionless on the ground. After the death of his daughter, Gu Tak became depressed, losing all purpose in life. He can only thought about hatred. Gu Tak even went to Young Moon's house to revenge him, and was suspended from work because of his foolish actions. Despite that, Gu Tak still wanted Young Moon to be punished. Due to the lack of evidence, Gu Tak took advantage of Young Moon and his girlfriend's difficult living conditions. She was bribed 50 million won by Gu Tak. She would blame Young Moon to intend to kill her but failed. With falsified evidence of Gu Tak, Young Moon was immediately arrested. With the accusations that his girlfriend said, Young Moon was completely surprised. The court sentenced Young Moon to life imprisonment. After sending Young Moon to prison, the fire within Gu Tak never ceased. He wanted Young Moon to die at all cost. Gu Tak went to see the intermediary and hired an assassin to kill Young Moon. The old man introduced to Gu Tak an assassin who was in prison with Young Moon, that was Tae-soo. We have gradually seen the relationships between the characters. Is Gu Tak the last boss cause of everything, calling the three people to join the bad guys and take advantage of Tae-soo and Woong Cheol to kill Young Moon? Back to the present, Young Moon opened his eyes in an old basement. The doctor poured pills into Young Moon's mouth and forced him to drink. Young Moon gradually fainted after drinking the pills. Mi Young asked Gu Tak if he was the person behind everything. The person who wanted to eliminate Young Moon. Gu Tak smiled and said yes, but the truth behind it was not like that. Gu Tak summoned the bad guys originally to solve cases. His personal goal was not to kill Young Moon at all. The person who wanted to kill Young Moon wasn't Gu Tak. 2 years ago, after sending Young Moon to prison, in Gu Tak's heart, instead of being relieved, he felt guilty, wondering if he had blindly blamed Young Moon without any clear evidence at all. Putting Young Moon in prison only made Gu Tak conclude that he had found his daughter's killer. Hope his heart be in peace. Because of that mistake, Gu Tak decided to take Young Moon out, observe to see if he was the person who killed his daughter. Gradually through the cases, Gu Tak saw the honesty inside of Young Moon, which a cold-blooded killer wouldn't be able to have. But tonight he was shocked by Young Moon. Gu Tak thought he was betrayed by a psychopath, so he decided to find Young Moon. Mi Young called 2 policemen, intending to take Gu Tak away. Mi Young followed O prosecutor and wanted to disband the bad guys. But perhaps only someone lost his mind would mess with this crazy guy. To Gu-tak, these two policemen were not his enemy. Confront of Mi-young's gun, he said after capturing Young Moon, he would go confess. Meanwhile, the police discovered the body of Du Kwang at his home. The investigation found that he was killed with a knife at the scene. The knife had Young Moon's fingerprints on it. Checking the camera, they saw Young Moon go to Du Kwang's house the day he died. Witnessing this scene, Wong Cheol could hardly control his emotions. Meet Tae-soo and Mi-young outside. Prosecutor said that Gu-tak was the one who wanted to kill Young Moon. Everything originated from him. Since Gu-tak wanted to hire assassins to kill Young Moon, leading to Tae-soo's family turning to murder each other. We all know what this prosecutor was lying about. Gu-tak said that he was not the person who wanted to kill Young Moon. Prosecutor's purpose of lying that was to disband the bad guys. Tae-soo and Wong Cheol with hatred went to find the other two. Tae-soo asked the old man to use a covert listening device to tune into the phone of Gu-tak's colleague, to determine where Gu-tak was. Wong Cheol returned to the gang. The uncle was the leader now. Tell his juniors to bring Young Moon's photo around the area and find where he was. Young Moon woke up after drinking a bunch of drugs and saw his hands and feet covered in blood. Seeing the doctor talking to someone, he tried to run away but was electrocuted again by the doctor. He was taken away by Cha Captain. This Cha Captain was not a henchman, he was an accomplice with the doctor on the way. Wong Cheol's junior saw Young Moon in the car and quickly jumped up to block it. The car didn't stop and kept driving, causing Ju to fall to the ground. Taking advantage of the chaos, Young Moon shot the henchman, causing the car to lose control and crash into the fence. At this time, Wong Cheol's juniors had already chased after and followed Young Moon to a hotel. Young Moon hid in a room, poured water on the floor, then waited for the henchmen to arrive and shot them all fell. Until Wong Cheol arrived, Young Moon was no longer here. Gu-tak was informed by his colleague that Young Moon had escaped from the doctor. Gu-tak immediately thought of a way to force Young Moon to reveal. He went to find Young Moon's ex-girlfriend and told her to call Young Moon to say that Gu-tak came and threatened her. Young Moon didn't want to put her in danger, so he came. Meanwhile, Mi-young and prosecutor came to find the head officer, told him to quickly disband the bad guys, but the head officer did not agree. He felt quite upset when Mi-young was in the same side with that prosecutor. He had treated her like a daughter. Young Moon went to his girlfriend's place and met Gu-tak there. He beat and pointed the gun at Young Moon's head. He's gonna fire when Tae-soo and Wong Cheol arrived. Tae-soo hit Gu-tak because he thought Gu-tak was the one behind everything. The two of them could have become friends. The whole team turning to kill each other like this was truly sad. Tae-soo picked up the gun and tried to shoot Gu-tak, but he couldn't do it. Deep down, he probably still believed in his captain. He wasn't the person who wanted to kill Young Moon. The uncle also intended to finish off him to revenge for Du Kwang. Young Moon seemed to have given up and accepted what he did not do. It was useless for Young Moon to explain he didn't kill Du Kwang. He wanted to relieve his burden by dying. Too helpless to be labeled a murderer and for something he didn't do. Luckily, Wong Cheol did not let his angry emotions overwhelm him and stopped in time. The four of them got in the car and found Young Moon's doctor to investigate. At this time, on the other side, prosecutor met the head officer. He told the head officer about what had happened to him. Previously, his wife was also killed by a serial killer. Just like the head officer, after losing his close person, he went to prison to see what the killer was like. Prosecutor wanted the killer to feel guilty for what he had done. But when he came, his impassible face made prosecutor even angrier. He had no regrets at all. So prosecutor has gradually lost faith in the law. He wanted to make the killer feel as much pain as the victims he had killed. That was the true treatment. Prosecutor knew that the killer also had a wife. He loved her very much. Prosecutor came to the house and killed the wife whom the killer loved, the same as the killer had killed his wife. The murderer also became emaciated after his wife died. Prosecutor seemed to get the satisfaction he wanted. Going back to the conversation, why did he tell the head officer these things? Prosecutor admitted his crime because he had a plan already. He wanted to make the head officer mad before killing him. After eliminating the head officer, he immediately went to arrange his plan. While the head officer was dying, he called Gu-tak. He called the last. He did not want to reveal the killer, because he did not want Gu-tak to take revenge anymore. He said that Gu-tak has lived too hard his whole life, so he should not continue to rush in. Return and live a peaceful life, as an ordinary person. Gu-tak couldn't control his emotions after hearing that. They drove to the place where the head officer often visited, only to find that he was no longer breathing. Waiting for this opportunity, prosecutor appeared with a group of people, including Cha Captain. Prosecutor appeared victorious. He blamed it on the bad guys that killed the head officer, but his tricks ain't passing the eyes of Gu-tak. Gu-tak immediately grabbed his right hand. Prosecutor's hand has a wound in the palm of his hand. If he held a knife and used too much force, it could cause his hand to be cut by the blade. Just one small detail made everyone know that this prosecutor was a murderer. There was nothing to say. Prosecutor ordered his juniors to attack, and both sides charged and fought fiercely. Tae-soo fought a duel with Cha Captain. The fight was almost equal. Meanwhile, Woong Cheol still used his powerful punches to knock them all down. One by one they fell to the ground. Young Moon and Gu Tak saw that there were too many henchmen, while Woong Cheol and Tae-soo were trying to fight. Young Moon quickly stole the car from the henchmen. The four of them got in the car and drove away. That night, Mi-young was extremely sad about the loss of the commissioner. She determined to find the murder without knowing the prosecutor had done it. Prosecutor took the opportunity, spreading the news of the head officer's death, blaming the bad guys. Now the news and the members' faces were everywhere. Gu Tak and 3 people couldn't go anywhere, so they hid in an abandoned house. The next plan would be to capture the doctor at all. If they caught him, the truth would be revealed. The doctor was extremely confused now. They had to seduce the doctor to come to their place. Young Moon asked Mi-young, even though Mi-young used to work with prosecutor. But she didn't believe that the bad guys killed the head officer. Young Moon promised to find out the truth, so they received Mi-young's agreement. Mi-young quickly closed the circuit breaker and fired 2 alarm shots, then called the doctor to say that Young Moon had broken into where he was hiding. Go down to the parking lot, get into a gray car. The doctor did so without a doubt. Cha Captain found the doctor down below. He told to come back, but the doctor didn't listen. He ran to the gray car and was caught by Young Moon. They quickly drove away, successfully captured the doctor. During the interrogation, the uncle and Tae-soo took turns, forcing him to confess. Then the doctor confessed. He said that a few years ago, the doctor's wife was also killed by a serial killer. Prosecutor was responsible for the doctor's wife's case, successfully put the murderer in prison. That's how these 2 people knew each other. But even so, the doctor didn't feel any better, living like a soulless person for 2 years until one day, prosecutor contacted the doctor again. He said that he was handling a very special case. The defendant in this case was a psychopath. The next day, prosecutor took Young Moon to the doctor. These 2 guys made a plan. They used a nerve inhibitor medicine. It has side effects of causing emotional disturbances and memory loss. They gave Young Moon this medicine every day, and eventually put him in a sleepwalking state. After Young Moon goes into a sleepwalking state, the doctor will show him photos, make you remember the address, name, gender, and let Young Moon go kill that person. But the results disappointed the doctor and the prosecutor. Although Young Moon went to the victim's door unconsciously, he still did not allow himself to kill. Du Kwon was also killed by the prosecutor in this way. So did the prosecutor kill people for fun? Not really. He chose targets who were relatives of the cold-blooded murderers. He wanted the murderers to suffer the pain he experienced. 15 people murdered were all relatives of the murderers. Only Gu Tak's daughter. The reason why Gu Tak's daughter was in the spotlight because Young Moon had not yet been convicted of the crime at that time. They wanted Young Moon to go to jail instead of them. The prosecutor knew that Gu Tak suspected Young Moon was a criminal. Prosecutor took advantage of that and killed Gu Tak's daughter to make Gu Tak extremely angry, and it seems that the prosecutor's plan was successful. When Gu Tak did exactly as he predicted, and after Young Moon was recruited into the bad guys, prosecutor became afraid that his actions would be revealed. He wanted to eliminate Young Moon, so he hired assassins and asked Du Kwon to do it. Gu Tak, after knowing the truth, went out and apologized to Young Moon, giving him his gun, implicitly saying that he wanted to use his life to fix his mistakes. Young Moon raised the gun but didn't shoot. A person was called a psychopath but has humanity and emotions more than anyone else. Young Moon declared that they planned to find prosecutor to put an end to everything. Knowing that prosecutor eavesdropped on Mi-young's phone, he pretended to tell Mi-young to go to a port and said he would take the doctor there. Prosecutor, after hearing that, fell into the trap and quickly dispatched people there. Before leaving, Tae-soo decided to do one thing. He went to So-young's house when she returned, admitted that he killed her husband because he had a crush on So-young, but she was married. Tae-soo assassinated So-young's husband and orchestrated an accident. But then Tae-soo realized his actions were too blind. He turned himself in. After hearing that, So-young couldn't say anything. She sat down and cried. After taking care of his matters, Tae-soo's burden had been relieved. Now the team could focus on catching the target. They arrived at the location. They predicted where he would watching from afar. Gu Tak and Mi-young pretended to phone call, revealing the location of the doctor on the boat. Prosecutor believed it, telling Cha Captain led his juniors onto the boat, but they actually fell into the trap. They met Tae-soo and Woong Cheol on the boat. Woong Cheol punched each of them with a deadly punch. Tae-soo continued to use his assassin skills, punching and breaking their arms. After defeating 3 to 4 henchmen at once, Cha Captain appeared again. Their previous battle ended indecisively. Cha Captain initiatively rushed in first. This was an eye for an eye. But Cha Captain gradually became weaker, so he used a knife to stab him. But he did not know that he was fighting with a knife master. Every knife strike from him was blocked. Then he was lifted and pounded on an iron rod by Tae-soo. His spine snapped in half and would be disabled for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, Wang Qiu still punched the henchmen. There were too many of them, but all were fallen by his punch. Wang Qiu used his hands to punch their heads bloody. When they were about to attack him one last time, Seok came to support Wang Qiu. They quickly knocked them all down. Meanwhile, prosecutor discovered that Young Moon took the doctor to a room. Young Moon was shot by a bullet from the prosecutor and was no longer able to resist. The prosecutor appeared extremely victorious and confessed all his sins. He still affirmed that killing the murderer's relatives was a way to make the murderer suffer a tormenting punishment, and also a comfort to the victims killed by murderers. But finally, prosecutor engaged in wrongful actions only to deny his desire for murder. There was no purpose for punishment because the relatives of the murderers were normal people. Just like when we do something wrong, we often come up with a reason for what we do to make it right. This prosecutor was the same. Gu Tak slowly took his veil off. He hit repeatedly the prosecutor, but Young Moon stopped him. The prosecutor was punched terribly. Gu Tak pointed at the camera and walked out. Every confession words had been recorded. Mi Young swiftly led her team to arrest the prosecutor. Remember when Mi Young and Gu Tak were talking? Mi Young said that the head officer was dead, so it was difficult to enforce the sentence reduction for the members. Mi Young advised Gu Tak to run away after finishing this case. Because of the case 2 years ago, Gu Tak falsified evidence to frame Young Moon. But Gu Tak did not agree with that. The 4 members walked out without fear, unlike the 2019 version. 4 members of the bad guys came out and were welcomed. But in this part, they come out as criminals seeing the gun barrels pointing at them, ready to accept the punishment for the crimes committed. At this time, Mi Young revisited the case starting from the rainy killer. Do you remember the serial killer when it rains? He assassinated 22 victims, the 23rd victim they thought he killed but he didn't, meaning that the woman in the picture was assassinated by another. So what is the method to find the killer? Mi Young just smiled and to find a solution. She went to Gu Tak's prison cell and said, I want to summon the bad guys once again. Okay, this is the end of the movie. Please take 3 seconds to subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching our channel. See you in the next movie. Goodbye.